Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Orro of the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. So, now that I got the 2025 live-action Disney reimagining of Snow White out of the way, starting today, I'm going to look at a couple of films which were voted on a poll that I made on my YouTube channel on April 18th, and judging by this chart here, the one that got the highest votes is a film that I've been dreading to blog for many years, ever since I started back in 2013. But before we get started, let's return to Walt Disney's 1961 animated classic, 101 Dalmatians. Now, as I said, during the previous year of dogs, which was way back in 2018, 101 Dalmatians has got to be one of my favorite animated Disney classics next to Lady and the Tramp, Dumbo, Bambi, and several others. Also, during 2021, I looked at both its straight-to-DVD animated sequel, 101 Dalmatians 2, Patch's London Adventures, and the live-action spin-off film, Cruella, starring Emma Stone, both of which were excellent and fun to share with my viewers. Plus, I also mentioned that 101 Dalmatians has gained a cult following over the years by influencing an animated storybook CD-ROM game, 2 animated TV shows, a quest in Kingdom Hearts, and 2 live-action films, which were released before 2021's Cruella. And the film that I have to blog today is not only the second live-action Disney remake, but it also makes its animated counterpart more classical than ever. So, with that said, might as well start the blog. Released on November 27th, 1996, the movie is 101 Dalmatians. So, on for the plot of the movie. After a wild chase in the bustling streets of London, struggling video game designer Roger Dearly and his pet Dalmatian Pongo, by a welcome twist of fate, are dragged into St. James Park and meet with the charming fashionista Anita and her pet Dalmatian Perdita. Before they know it, Roger and Anita fall in love and get married, and Perdita becomes pregnant with 15 puppies. However, their short-lived joy is disrupted when Anita's glamorous but horrible boss, Cruella de Vil, dognaps the innocent pups with the intention of making a luxurious coat with their fabulously spotted fur. Eventually, along with Pongo and Perdita's children, Cruella manages to bring the total to a staggering number of 99 Dalmatian puppies. So, my thoughts? Okay, in my personal opinion, while it is somewhat entertaining, this has sadly got to be the weakest live-action Disney remake I've ever grown up with. But be glad it's not Annie 2014 bad or Jem and the Holograms 2015 bad. But anyway, let's just move on to Mustang Notes. Now, as I said earlier, this was the second remake based on an animated Disney film, the first being Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book from 1994. The film was directed by Stephen Herrick, who had also directed Critters, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, The Mighty Ducks, The Three Musketeers, and Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors. The script was written by John Hughes, who had also worked on Weird Science, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the 1997 Flubber movie, the first 3 National Lampoon films, Baby's Day Out, Miracle on 34th Street, Dennis the Menace, Beethoven, and the first 3 Home Alone films. Filming took place between 1995 and 1996 at Shepperton Studios in London. Minster Court was used as the exterior of Cruella de Vil's fashion house, Sarum Chase was used as the exterior of her home, and they also shot the film in other London locations such as Kenwood House and Trafalgar Square. The animatronic creatures used in the film were provided by Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Producer Edward S. Feldman guaranteed the adoption of every puppy used in the movie. Over 300 Dalmatian puppies were used over the course of filming because we could only use them when they were 5 or 6 weeks old and at their cutest. After the film was released, it grossed about $320.7 million in theaters against a $67 million budget, making it the 6th highest grossing film of 1996, despite receiving mixed reviews. Plus, it was nominated for a BAFTA award for Best Makeup and Hair, but it lost to The Nutty Professor. Also, the film influenced 3 video games during the 1990s, not just the 1997 Disney animated storybook CD-ROM game, which used elements of both this movie and the original animated film, but also a handheld LCD game by Tiger Electronics and 101 Dalmatians Escape from DeVille Manor for the PC in May 1997. Unfortunately, there was some controversy regarding this movie. You see, animal rights organizations protested the movie's release, saying that Dalmatian sales shot up after the premiere, fueled by impulsive purchases of puppies by parents for their children. Being ill-prepared to care for a relatively difficult breed of dog past puppyhood, many of these new owners eventually surrendered their animals to shelters where many dogs ended up being euthanized. Now, before I move on, I must mention that a while back, 2 of my favorite reviewers, Eli Stone, aka the Hero of Tomorrow, and Isaac the Media Hunter, got to share their thoughts on this remake before I could. And after rewatching their reviews, I pretty much agree with them. Anyway, I'd like to share my experience with this movie by describing the positive and the negative. Let's start with a few of the positives. Now, firstly, this was the very first movie that I ever saw at the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles before I ever saw films like 1999's Tarzan, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, Brother Bear in 2003, Around the World in 80 Days in 2004, A Christmas Carol in 2009, and Lightyear in 2022. Secondly, I like that this film is set in London, which me, along with my family, got to visit back in summer 2010, and it's one of 3 European destinations that I'll be visiting this coming summer. The other 2 being Paris, France, finally, and Sardinia, Italy, which is where I'll be reuniting with my countless Italian relatives from my dad's side. Also, I sort of like the countryside of Suffolk, which, may I remind you viewers, is not too far from London. And believe me, it's been a while since I mentioned this part of the UK on my blog show. Not only during my blog of the 1961 animated classic, but also during my blog of That Christmas last year. Plus, I think the DeVille Mansion looks very well designed, and I think the inside of this estate looks very run down and dilapidating. Thirdly, I think the puppies in this movie are really adorable, and I think it must have been really difficult to train about 320 Dalmatians. Plus, I kind of like that Sergeant Tibbs makes a minor cameo in this. And fourthly, I really like Dr. John's cover of Cruella de Vil, which in my opinion is very jazzy and raspy, and it's got to be one of my favorite covers of this classical villain song next to Selena Gomez's version and the animated storybook version. As for the negatives, well, firstly, in the original book and in the animated film, the story is set in the 1950s. Unfortunately, I feel like this remake is set in modern day, since movies like The Aristocats and Homeward Bound, which are featured in this movie, were not released until the 1970s or the 1990s. Also, video games did not exist until the 1980s came along. Secondly, I kind of don't like the fact that none of the animals talk in this version, like in the cartoon or in the book. Thirdly, while the comedy is sometimes entertaining, mostly it can range from over the top to mature to gross at times. As for the story, well, it kind of feels a bit rushed in a few scenes. Also, there are a couple bits that include some not very well done CGI. And the last thing that I don't like in this film is Whizzer. Why? Just why? Did the filmmakers really believe that a puppy peeing on things was funny? Well, I hate to tell you folks, but they aren't. It's downright disgusting. Alright. Now, onto the cast, as if it'll improve my opinion. Kinda. Let's start with Pongo and Perdita, whom were portrayed by 20 different adult Dalmatians. Now, I still find Pongo to be intelligent and brave, and Perdita to be beautiful and loving. Also, I think they're great parents while raising 15 to 99 puppies, and I thought it was kind of risky of them to run off away from home to find their stolen children. However, the main flaws involving them is 1, they don't talk in this remake, and 2, they don't get too many scenes. Also, I wonder what the movie would have been like if they were voiced by Michael Goff and Mary Kay Bergman like in the animated storybook. Next we come to their human pets, Roger and Anita Dearly, played by Jeff Daniels and Jolie Richardson. In my eyes, these two are pretty similar, but different compared to their book and cartoon counterparts. Let's start with Roger. Now, while I do give the film credit for changing his last name from Radcliffe to Dearly, which was his last name in the book, Roger is not British nor a musician. Instead, he's an American citizen who works as a video game designer, and he tests how good his games are through his greatest friend / boss's son, Herbert. As for Anita, well, in this film, she's a fashion designer working in the House of DeVille over the past 2 years, and she became one of the company's top employees. In fact, one of her designs was obviously Cruella's inspiration for wanting a Dalmatian fur coat. Next we come to Horace and Jasper, played by Hugh Laurie and Mark Williams. To me, these two are very similar to their animated counterparts. However, they are depicted as much more ruthless characters, and they never reform from their crimes. In fact, they actually seem to enjoy animal cruelty. Plus, I find them to be similar to the wet bandits Harry and Marv from the first 2 Home Alone films, as they too are incompetent robbers who suffer several accidents, they get outwitted by the protagonists, and they get arrested afterwards. Next up, we come to my favorite character in the film, Kipper, who is played by 3 Airedale Terriers. In my eyes, while he's not like the Colonel or Sergeant Tibbs, I think Kipper is a brave and noble character, and I like that he helps the puppies escape from the DeVille mansion and rescues Lucky from Mr. Skinner. By the way, here's a little fun fact regarding Kipper. A year after this movie, he appeared in the animated storybook CD-ROM game where he had the voice of Corey Burton, and he's seen in 2 minigames, one being Break the Secret Code in which the player helps Kipper get into the DeVille mansion, and the other being Find the Puppies, in which the player and Kipper need to look around the upstairs rooms in the DeVille mansion for clues as to where the puppies may be hiding. Another new character in this film is Mr. Skinner, played by the late John Shrapnel, who sadly died from prostate cancer on Valentine's Day of 2020. This character is a skinner and a taxidermist who often kills animals in order to make products out of them. To me, ever since I saw this movie at the El Capitan Theater, I found him to be very intimidating and sadistic. And his reason for his delight in killing animals is because a dog ripped out his vocal cords, which left him with a bad scar and mute. Though he can still grunt, groan, wheeze, and even growl when he gets angry. Plus, I find it pretty interesting that Skinner can communicate in Morse code when talking to somebody on the phone by tapping a knife against the receiver. Also to note, Skinner is based loosely on Cruella's husband, Mr. DeVille, from the original story, who was also a Skinner but could talk, except he had a more weak-willed personality, while Skinner has a more menacing personality. Finally, we come to the evil Cruella DeVille, played by Glenn Close, whom was in films like Tim Burton's Mars Attacks, 2 of Disney's Tarzan films, the Hoodwinked films, the MCU's Guardians of the Galaxy, and soon she'll be voicing in Andy Serkis's upcoming adaptation of Animal Farm. Now, we all know that Cruella deserves her place as one of the most threatening and menacing villains from Walt Disney's time. And to me, despite the fact that one scene involving her almost gave me a heart attack, I think Glenn Close does a fantastic job portraying her. In fact, I hate to admit it, but she's the best part of the entire film. Anyway, while Cruella is still an insane lady who worships fur coats and delights in killing animals for said fur, I think her fashion studio, the House of DeVille, is pretty abstract. And like I said in my Cruella blog back in 2021, Rarity from My Little Pony does way better fashion than Miss DeVille does. Plus, I like the scenes where Cruella gets outsmarted by not only the puppies, but also other animals, along with the part where she gets arrested by the police and where she becomes a villain in Roger's new hit video game. Also, fun fact, at first, Glenn Close turned down the role after being approached by John Hughes, but later, she took the role after being convinced by costume designer Anthony Powell. Also to note, Cruella's car in this movie is a modified 1976 Panther DeVille. Other members of the cast include the late Joan Plowright as Nanny, Tim McInerney as Alonzo, and Zoran Weiss as Herbert. And now, on to my final words. Overall, the 1996 remake of 101 Dalmatians has got to be one of the weakest movies from my childhood. While some parts were entertaining and a few elements were trying to stay true to Dottie Smith's book and the 1961 animated classic, there were a lot of things that I didn't really personally like about it, like the modern day setting, the animals not talking, the story being rushed, and the comedy being a bit over the top, mature, and gross at times. But still, Glenn Close's performance as Cruella was the best part. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. Trust me, I've seen way worse. But do I recommend it? Well, not for everybody though. But it can't hurt to watch this at least once in a while. As for my rating, I'm going to give it a 56% out of 100. Now, you may be asking, will I blog its sequel, 102 Dalmatians? Well, that depends if I get a Patreon request to do it. But anyway, that's all for now. Be sure to join me next time where I look at an underrated film version of a classical rabbit story, Mustang Power.